Hello and welcome to this Hindu webinar this Saturday morning. Thanks so much for joining us. We are over the next hour going to try and decode Gulf War 3.0. I'm Suhasini Haidar, the diplomatic editor of the Hindu. And many of you I know will be trying to catch up on what has happened in this 1 week where it seems so much has changed, and worse could follow. In a sense, many talking about the idea that this Gulf War 3.0 is not going to be contained, is not just going to be a regional war, but will bring other players in. It's been exactly a week as we speak since news came in of a joint US-Israel operation to carry out a missile strike on Tehran, and not just anywhere in Tehran, but on a very specific compound where the supreme leader of the country, the religious leader, Sayyid Ali Khamenei, the Ayatollah, and his family were. The strike killed Khamenei and many members of his family, including small children, his granddaughter, and others. There was some evidence that he had been meeting with top advisors when he was attacked and targeted. Generals, cabinet members, all inside that room, although there are conflicting versions of just how many senior officials were killed there. Iran vowed revenge. Remember, amongst targets hit across Iran, and I'm just talking about the first 24 to 48 hours, and there's been much more since. But there was the visuals of a school where more than 150 people, including schoolgirls, were killed. Several Iranian nuclear installations destroyed, military hardware taken out. There was very specific targeting of civilian infrastructure as well, some suggesting that the US and Israel combined were trying to spread a little bit of civilian chaos at the time. So police stations, law and order situations were targeted. Hospitals were targeted, including one on the Gandhi Street, the Gandhi Hospital there. More than 1,000 are believed to have been killed in those early days of the operations. And then this week, the US targeted and torpedoed an Iranian ship, the Iris Dana. It was actually coming from India, where it had taken part in naval exercises. That ship went down, more than 80 sailors killed. The Sri Lankan Navy was able to rescue about 32. Two other Iranian ships have now been in the Indian Ocean as well. One was taken in by Sri Lanka. One was taken in by India in Kochi in those first few days as well. Remember, when the US decided to join Israeli operations to attack Iran, the US officials were in the midst of negotiations with Iranian officials over their nuclear program. They had met in Geneva. They planned to meet once again on Monday, 2 days after the strike, in Vienna. Of course, all that was put away. Now, that was on this one side. On the other, Iran's response came within a matter of hours. Attacks, particularly on Israel, including civilian buildings, and we saw consistent drone strikes, missile strikes on various cities in Israel. Attacks then on US bases, on areas that the US used, clubs that US personnel were at across 10 Gulf countries. Especially, we saw targeting of the UAE, and there were US Marines amongst those killed. In fact, US President Donald Trump will go to receive their bodies today. A lot of US military hardware has been destroyed in this kind of relentless bombardment from the Iranian side. Then Iran threatened to target US, Israeli, and European ships in the Hormuz Straits. And that led insurers to stop insuring those ships. There's now a jam in the Hormuz Straits. About 37 Indian ships are stuck there as well. So that's basically what happened a week ago and over the course of the last few days. Over the next hour, we're going to discuss what all this means for India and for the world. And with me, I'm very happy to introduce Ambassador Gaddam Dharmendra. He was India's former ambassador to Iran. He's served in many different places, including in the US, in Bangladesh, and other postings. He's a scholar in many ways, an advisory scholar there at the Carnegie Endowment as well. Also joining us, Kallol Bhattacherjee, the Hindu's diplomatic correspondent, a very familiar face for us all, and the author of several books on Indian diplomacy. Thank you, both of you, for joining us right now. I think we've lost Kallol for a bit. But if I could start with you, Ambassador Dharmendra, with this question. 1 week after the strikes. The Iranian regime seems to still be in place. They've lost their supreme leader, but the government seems to be working. Where exactly, firstly, were you surprised? And where exactly do you think things stand today?
Uh, Hello, Suhasini. Good to be with you. Thanks for having me over. I think you've given a good, quick recap of where we are 1 week into this act of needless belligerence and war. Uh, Expectations by the Americans in terms of what the outcomes are, what their intended game is, war game is, has been shifty. It's been moving and evolving as day to day. So there is some lack of clarity in that. But clearly expectations that there will be a quick decapitation strike, Iran will crumble as had happened, also displays a serious sense of hubris on the US side. Iran is quite different. It's a very, very deep country. It's a old civilization, and they have been prepared for this. While the talks were going on in Geneva, from the experiences of last June, they have been able to game multiple scenarios. So clearly, they have survived and will. There the American supremacy in terms of war capability is well established. Iran is no match for that capability. But the fact that they've survived 7 days and been able to counter-strike select targets across the Gulf, across various US bases, uh, testifies to the preparations the Iranians have put in from a very serious position of weakness. They are conventionally very, very weak. Their armed forces are not as well established as the Americans, but survive they did. And they've targeted almost every base in the region selectively. They have gone for radar systems to blind American detection capability to intercept Iranian missiles. They have unleashed a huge barrage, several hundreds and thousands of missiles into Israel and struck targets. Now, the American B-2 bombers have targeted uh, deep missile cities, as the Iranians call them, underground bunkers where uh, scores of missiles are established. So we'll have to see what the outcome of that will be. But so far, if the Americans and the Israelis have started a war, how it's going to end may not be easily determined by them. I think that's where we are today. The regime will survive, they have survived, and they have prepared for this by multiple layers of delegated powers. So it's quite decentralized.
In fact,
There's no
it is very,
particular
it's
central
very
command.
interesting. Yeah. It seems extremely interesting
So I
that
think they
while.
have layers of succession.
Mhm.
So they have layers of succession plans put in place, on and what will be the intervention by third third actors like Qatar, Turkey, I believe even China sent a special envoy in. So we'll have to see how those mediation efforts will play out and what will be the off ramps the Americans and the Israelis will settle for.
That is very interesting. And I just wanted to ask you one question because it seems from what you're saying is that the Americans had, with Israeli help, very good, perhaps targeting capability, intelligence on just where the leaders were, but they don't seem to have gamed the kind of response that Iran has been able to put up militarily. In the years that you were posted there, was there evidence that Iran would be able to hold off this kind of an invasion for as much as a week or possibly more?
Uh, the decision to go to war, there is a kind of dichotomy in the American negotiating position. was quite unexpected. This is a lack of distrust in diplomacy. It shows bad faith. You've had very successful talks in Geneva last week, where Omani Foreign Minister Badr Al Busaidi had declared that if the intention was to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, he said, "I think we've nailed that problem." Very categorically, he said that. Within 2 days, as you rightly pointed out, these on Saturday last week, they undertake aggression on Iran. They strike Iran, and I think what has been much more devastating and which has now attracted the very very furious reaction from Iran has been the assassination of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. I mean, you've gone for the top leadership, who is both a spiritual and a political leader, and he's a polarizing figure. Let's be clear about that. So, the response of the Iranians, for me personally, is not surprising, given that Supreme Leader himself has been taken out in the first couple of hours. So, yes, the Iranians have always have shown they have the capability, but they are also a reactive power. They don't war. But if provoked, I think we are seeing the reaction can be quite furious. Last June, in the 12-day war, they showed a similar capability.
Sure.
They fended off for 12 days Israeli and American strikes. And again, this time they've been able to do the same. So I think Iranian capabilities are generally underestimated. We have to recognize that the Americans don't have a presence in Iran. They don't have diplomatic relations since 1979. So they don't know how the system works, what the country is all about. They get it from second or third hand sources. It's a very well established system. Just to think that they'll roll over and surrender, I think is a gross underestimation and a misreading of the Iranian people and the country.
Sure. Ambassador Dharmender, I wanted to get in a question here from Matthew Jinu Soji, who's talking about the next. I was listing all the actions by the US Israel combine. I was listing all the actions by Iran targeting Gulf countries, targeting Israel and US bases across the region. But the real question is, where will this head in terms of the other international responses? So Matthew's asking, will other Gulf countries join the war? They've condemned the strikes, but will they join the war? What's the role and power of UN, he asks? Will Russia and China join the war beyond offering intelligence to Iran? I think, in short, will this be World War III? And we can get into that a little bit later. But I did want to ask you, are you seeing signs that other players will now line up on one side or the other?
Suhasini, that's a very good question, and the downstream effects are still playing out. I think it'll take time for all these these issues to play out. This is a paradigm shift. Let's be very clear about it. So, to the first part of the question, the French are sending in an aircraft carrier into the region. The UN Secretary General has condemned what is called a crime of aggression. The others are mostly sitting it out. The Gulf countries, by and large, have not responded other than verbal protests against Iran. They have not done much. But do keep in mind, the Emiratis have taken a big hit from the Iranians, quite surprisingly, and there is a lot of angst in Emirates. Some of the public figures closely associated with the leadership in Emirates has been particularly critical of Donald Trump for bringing a war into their neighborhood, an unprovoked war. So we'll see these downstream effects play out over time. Like I mentioned earlier, the Chinese are sending in a special envoy. The Russians have so far sat it out. But more importantly, I think there are going to be massive economic and financial repercussions flowing out of this conflict. I think that is where the focus should be. Whenever this ends, I hope it's soon. What will then happen to the energy markets? What will happen to net importers like India? How quickly will Oman be able to restart its LNG facilities? I think those are issues we need to stay focused on. And also the deep linkage between the Gulf countries and the United States in terms of financial exposure. There are a lot of investments in the US. What will happen to those investments? I think those will be the areas of focus we need to keep in mind as we go forward. The immediate reaction has been still a little nuanced, careful, particularly by the Gulf countries. They'll have to live in that region. And we'll have to see what will be the exits prepared. But the overall focus, myself personally, I mean, I'll be looking at the economic and financial side of how this will play out. It's going to have
That
a
is
lot of.
interesting. And it was part of the targeting for Iran that for the Gulf in the past, when there have been this kind of Iran Israel standoffs, the Gulf has pitched itself more or less as a safe oasis. And the expatriate community there, the investments that they are building, whether it's the UAE's own special cities, whether it is Neom in Saudi Arabia, we're seeing the Gulf countries really pitching themselves as the center of global commerce, the center of gravity moving from New York and London to Dubai and possibly Riyadh and Doha. So that's one place where perhaps Iran is trying to target that if we are hurt, you will feel some of this pain as well. Is that the case?
True, very true. Very, I think you've captured it well. I think that's where we need to be looking at. This may end now or maybe in a couple of days. Look, Iran, in terms of conventional armaments, cannot face up to the might the Americans can bring into play. I think that there is no doubt about that. No one should have any doubt about that. The overwhelming asymmetry between the two sides is substantial. Uh, but yes, the Gulf countries, the Persian Gulf countries, have been very careful in their responses. There's a lot of angst. Why did, particularly in Emirates, while like I mentioned, they are unhappy with the Americans, they're equally unhappy with the Iranians. Because Dubai was, despite all the American pressure, they were very cooperative with the Iranians in terms of helping their financial transactions. The Americans were unhappy with Emirates, but the Iranians were doing a lot of their dealings with through Dubai and various third-party accounts and transactions. So I think this is going to have a lot of cascading effects through the region.
Certainly. In fact, I keep losing Kallol, but I did want to ask him because, India has been affected in so many ways, which I want to discuss. But one of those has been this last few days. We're in the middle of the Ministry of External Affairs' most prestigious annual event, the Raisina Dialogue. And we understand as many as 1,100 of the 1,800 foreign delegates that were expected there had to pull out, cancel, or was stuck in one of these airports where the airspace was closed. So India saw this head on, as one impact. But of course, you were mentioning the economic impacts, and now I want to move a little bit to how India is being affected by what we're seeing over there. A question from Arun Kumar Swaminathan. He says, with nearly 1 crore Indians living in the Gulf, maritime attacks intensifying. What immediate steps must India take to protect its citizens, shipping routes, energy lifelines across the Arabian Sea and the wider Indian Ocean? It's a pretty large canvas, but Ambassador Dharmendra, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I think let's start with the diaspora. About over 9 million people living in the Gulf countries. The response of the GCC member countries to protect their citizens has been remarkable. Whether it is permitting controlled air flights out of their airports, advising people to stay indoors, take shelter, not move out. I think their response has been much better, and I think we'll just have to do some ensure all the Indians are safe. We have facilitated, I think, Indian air carriers have landed in Oman. Oman has been particularly proactive in assisting and facilitating exits of people stranded in those countries. As regards shipping routes, I think again the viewer has raised an important point. Hormuz is shut down. I mean, I think from about 140 to 160 tankers in the straits per day, we are down to almost zero. Insurance costs have gone up. Many major, including Lloyd's in the US, have in the UK, have stopped insuring tankers, and where they are extending insurance, the rates have gone through the roof. It's almost $230,000 is what I understand per day per tanker. So that's one aspect. So the shipping routes outside of the Hormuz stay safe, but within the straits, there is a threat. Will the US start escorting vessels outside from the straits? I don't think so, because then they will be exposing their naval vessels to Iranian missiles. Right now, they're located well over 500 miles from the Iranian coast, away from Iranian missiles. So that's one thing. But the sea lanes of communications through the Arabian Sea remain open, not through the Hormuz Straits. So that's one thing. The other interesting point is the Red Sea remains open because the Bab el Mandeb Straits, which were attacked repeatedly by the Houthis, have remained untouched. The Houthis have not yet stepped into the fray. I mean, that is a interesting aspect. I mean, if you look at all the pro-Iranian militias who've come into play, I'm just digressing a little bit from the question
Oh, but
asked, but we'll have to focus that the Hezbollah has come in. The Iraqi
right.
militias have carried out some punitive strikes, nothing substantial. Israel has attacked all the Hezbollah facilities in Beirut and near the Litani River on the border. But the Houthis, the Ansar Allah, which have played a major role in past conflict scenarios in between the Hamas and Israel, have now kind of not stepped into the fray yet. So that's interesting. So again, to come back to the sea lanes of communication, yes, the straits remain closed, which means there's no shipment of energy, LNG or crude. The Red Sea remains open, so we have the Suez Iranian pipeline, these Saudis operate east-west pipeline. So that remains open. So there can be shipments. Fujairah was attacked. I don't know what is, but the Emirati refinery in Fujairah was also hit in the early days of the campaign. So India's net energy imports from the Gulf, approximately 30% of our energy needs, will be affected. The government has been comforting. They said we have substantial crude reserves. But I think there's been a bit of this thing on the LNG. I think we may have about 2 weeks of LNG supplies, is what I read in the media. So we'll have to wait and see. So yeah, not
You
just
need
India,
LNG
Singapore
in
will
about
be hit.
25
Korea
to
is
30 days.
already, you know,
Yes. So basically, just to sum up what you're saying, is
sorry, come again, Suhasini?
the impact on India's economy, just to sum up what you were saying, is there is the impact on trade routes, Hormuz in particular, but also other trade routes. The impact on Indian expatriates, 10 million in the Gulf. There are about 5,000 still in Iran, about 20,000 in Israel. The impact on travel back and forth, we've already seen it, even though it is temporary, but the larger impact it'll have on so many Indian airlines that are operating in this region who are suffering huge losses. The impact finally on energy security, on energy imports, as well as export of refined products, which is a big remittance earner for India. So there are many ways that India is going to be hit in this crisis. Ambassador Dharmendra, we have now a lot of questions, so I'm going to try and get through all of them one by one. To begin with, there are questions about India's stance. So I'll just read those out. Anurag has a few. Anurag R. The first, by its responses, and before I get to Anurag's question, let's just spell out what India's responses have been. Right at the beginning, as soon as the first attacks on from US and Israel on Iran happened, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar was on the telephone to the Iranian foreign minister. He also spoke to his counterparts across the region. Prime Minister Modi spoke, and you remember Prime Minister Modi had just returned from Israel 2 days before these strikes. He spoke to his counterparts across the region, to Prime Minister Netanyahu, to Gulf country leaders. He didn't, however, speak to his counterpart Masoud Pezeshkian. Whether it was because Mr. Pezeshkian was unavailable, we're not sure. The interesting thing is the Prime Minister condemned the strikes by Iran on the Gulf countries. However, India has at no point condemned or criticized the US Israeli strikes on Iran so far. So that's one part of India's policy. The second part we saw was essentially after 5 days of not condoling for the death of Khamenei, we saw the Indian Foreign Secretary go to the Iranian embassy as soon as the condolence books were opened, and he signed over there expressing condolences on behalf of India for the people of Iran. So that's the second part of India's posture so far. The third part, and that has been a kind of what is being seen by many as a silence over the larger imprint of this war, which is the torpedoing of a Iranian ship just in the Indian Ocean of India's waters, of Sri Lankan waters, that led to those deaths that I was speaking about. So let me just go through these questions now. And I see Kallol is back, and I'm hoping he's going to tell us more as well. Anurag's question: has India become way too pro-US and Israel? Is this balance in some way being broken? A second question: earlier, India used to take moral stands on anything wrong that happened. Have we given that up? And is it a wise choice? Would you like to take that, Ambassador?
Yes, Suhasini. I think in the fog of war, usually, it's sometimes difficult to reach out to leaderships. Yes, but I do agree that we should have been a little more proactive in speaking out on some of these developments. Look, we have a large Shia community in India. Hyderabad, my hometown, Lucknow, Jammu and Kashmir, we have a substantial Shia population. And Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, like I said, was a polarizing figure, but he was also seen like a pope. There's some kind of, reverence he's held in. So I think we should have been a little more upfront in at least condoling his demise and the manner of his demise. I think we should have. But balancing our relations with multiple actors in a fast developing situation, I think, tends towards a much more realistic foreign policy we've adopted in the last decade or so. And I think we have to recognize that India is rising. We have to look after our national interest. We are dependent on supply chains. The resilience of those chains will remain fundamental to our economic growth. We are dependent, we are a net energy importer, so security of supply is fundamental. We actually faced off enormous American pressure to continue importing crude from Russia. So I think these point towards a much more realistic foreign policy, a much more forward-looking posture. There will be critics. It may not go down well with everybody, but I think days of grandstanding and moralizing are in the past. We have to look at what our equities are. We have substantial equities in the Persian Gulf countries, GCC. The kind of energy requirements, the kind of investments, the bilateral trade agreements we have, particularly with the Emirates, these are very important for us. Iran is again a very strategic player for us, given our interest in Chabahar. our interests in roots. I think so. We'll have to balance between the two. And at the end of the day, the United States will remain a critical player, whichever country, whether it's China, whether it's India, whether it's the Gulf countries. The United States will remain, for the foreseeable future, a key player.
All right.
They have to remain. There will be some tensions, yes. There will be critics, yes. But we'll have to, at the end of the day, look at what is in our national interest and how we need to safeguard those interests. I think that will be the driver of our policy making decision makers.
Sure. Kallol, you have tracked this relationship for how many decades? And you've been at the Raisina dialogue. I know that you've spent some time with the Iranian foreign minister, Khatibzadeh, who spoke also, the deputy foreign minister who spoke at Raisina dialogue in Delhi, met with external affairs minister S. Jaishankar. I wanted you to take these questions as well. There's one from Anurag that said, has India become way too pro-US and Israel? Another one coming from Vinay T, who asked, why is India not taking any stand, adding, can this happen to India in the future? I wanted you to weigh in on whether you are seeing a major shift in India's normal positions on the region.
Yeah, thanks, Suhasini. I'm reminded of what the former and the now late National Security Advisor Brajesh Mishra used to say about India-US relationship, because he actually restarted or revived the relationship after the 1998 nuclear test during Atal Bihari Vajpayee government. And Brajesh Mishra used to say that India's relation with the United States at times will be closer or more intimate than India's relationship with other powers. And it was like understood that maneuvering of that relationship will be conducted by India to its own advantage. I think what we are seeing right now is slightly drifting away from the Brajesh Mishra formulation, because right now it appears that India is muted, especially when India's voice is much sought after in global affairs, especially by countries in the global south. Because if India remains muted, especially in circumstances where there is a very big display of aggressive naval power, and India remains silent about such display of might so close to India's shores, it really sends a very negative message as far as the global south is concerned. So I would say that though it's not really spelt out, but one can easily sense that India is drifting away from the Brajesh Mishra principle when it comes to India's relation with the United States and Israel.
Interesting point there, Kallol. What?
Kallol, can I?
Yes, please go
Yeah,
ahead.
Kallol.
Yeah.
Kallol, yeah, interesting point, Kallol. But we are two almost 15, 20 years away from Mishraji's days. It's a different world. It's really, it's quite a fragmented world. It's challenged under so many dimensions. So I think what was said 20 years ago and where we are today, there's been a lot of change in the world. It's a much more
Certainly. And
fragmented and fragile systems we are dealing with.
yeah, when we speak to MEA officials, they'll often say,
Yep.
That there are several other reasons. There's, of course, India-Israel ties are now much stronger than they've ever been before. And one never expected to hear it, but Prime Minister Netanyahu thanked Prime Minister Modi for his support during the conflict. Normally, India stays far away from such statements. India-Iran ties have been on a slide, and I know that you've been posted there. But even in the last year, what we have seen, the oil that India gave up from Iran was in 2019. After that, the US has in recent months said, give up Chabahar port. There's a D-Day, I think, deadline day of April 25th, by which India has to completely wind up operations in Chabahar port. The US has threatened, on the turn of the year, the US threatened sanctions of 100% on any country trading or engaging with Iran. apart from this, the idea that India has, not been welcoming the guests from Iran as much. There was supposed to be a visit by Foreign Minister Aragchi earlier this year. So there's that sense. There are MEA officials who have spoken about the idea that while in the 1990s, Khamenei actually forged an Indian relationship through that very famous incident in 1994 when Iran helped India defeat a Pakistani resolution at the Human Rights Council. But in recent years, Khamenei himself made comments about the treatment of minorities in India, about Kashmir as well. There's also India Gulf ties, particularly UAE ties, and then there's the India-US ties. If you were to sum up all of these, Ambassador Dharmendra, would you say that ties with Iran have suffered as a cost of India's ties with everyone else?
Suhasini, as we speak, Deputy Foreign Minister Khatibzadeh is in Delhi. He's been engaging our minister. He's held meetings here. So I think, look, by and large, we'll have to keep in mind the change in Washington, D.C., the kind of postures the Americans have taken in terms of, pressuring every partner they're dealing with, whether it's Japan, whether it's India, whether it's Russia, China, whoever, name it. Look at how the Europeans have taken a hit from the Americans. The statement by Mike Carney at Davos this year was very world situation. I think we'll have to be mindful of that. Now, the India-Iran relationship, I think it'll take a something contours of the relationship. It's substantial. We are forging our relations with other countries. There will be stresses and strains, but overall, I think the Iranians do recognize the importance of having India on side, of maintaining ties with India, recognizing they're also pragmatic. They do understand we are under pressure. So I think by and large, keeping the relations going, keeping the momentum, ongoing, I think that will be more important than these stresses and strains. I don't see. Look. Also, I want to make one point. There are two elections coming up this year. One is the midterm elections in the United States. So obviously, these developments of the last week and how these will play out in the coming weeks is going to have an impact on those elections. Second, Israel goes into elections sometime in October, if I'm not mistaken. Both these elections we'll have to keep in mind. Developments of today will have downstream effects, not just economic but definitely political. And then let's take a step back and see that in Tehran, decision making continues despite the loss of Supreme Leader Khamenei. There has been the move to select a replacement has already been completed. They are waiting to make the announcement. I believe they've shortlisted two. One of them is Khamenei's son, Mojtaba Khamenei, who's been actually the default gatekeeper of Supreme Leader Khamenei's inner office, and all the decision making would go through Mojtaba. So he's already online. He's also very close to the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. They're very, very powerful. So I think if you take the political side away from what the military developments have been, I think we're looking at two elections which we'll have to see how those play out, and one signs of stability, signaling both internally and externally that the Iranian establishment remains is surviving. There are no cracks in the system.
Sure. Now, both of you mentioned the US's change, the shift in what the US is doing, which has kind of forced so many other changes. I'm going to run through some of the questions so you get a sense of the viewers who are watching us, the kind of sentiments they have. Naman Nair writes in, if Trump would have it easy, he would have been emboldened to make more such moves, talking about Iran actually being able to hit back. What would be the strategy of countries that feel US hostilities and maybe fearing attacks like after Venezuela. Another question, since from Ramesh Prasad, since the Gulf War began, the hostilities from both sides have been manifested through the air mode. However, it needs to be realized that the regime change, as seen from the earlier United States forays in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya, so he's drawing that parallel there, all was successful only post the ground offensive. So the question really, is the US going to be there? Ankit Raj saying the global battlefield doctrine grants the US this unilateral authority to designate enemies, determine imminence, execute lethal force anywhere on earth. If we accept this logic for the United States today, what architecture, if any, prevents any other state from invoking the same doctrine tomorrow? Sanjeev Kumar, and you're getting the sense that this is really the questions. Is US changing the nature of the wars by targeting top leaders in the way they've done with Venezuela? And I think there was one more, a simple one from Bhuvan, who just said, I think the US is taking a very bad step. I want both of you, Kallol, maybe you go first, to weigh in on what is the impression. I get the sense from a lot of the readers here, also from some of the Gulf countries where we've been watching viewer comments, that this war is now being seen. Most people think the US will eventually prevail. They have doubled the military. They have 10 times the resources. They have defense budgets that are 100 times what Iran has. So this is being pitched much more as a David versus Goliath thing, but nobody really expecting that Iran can come out of this unscathed. What is your sense of what the US's particular policy, in terms of the international rule of law, is doing to other countries?
Well, Suhasini, you mentioned what happened in Venezuela, but Venezuela is on the other side of the planet as far as India is concerned. Right now, there are buzz about what's coming next for Cuba, which is again under pressure because of disruption in global energy supply chains, because of the ongoing war with Iran. If you look at it from that point of view, I would say Iran is really closer home. And the message that we are receiving as residents of this part of the planet is that if Iran's top leadership, who was also the Pope of his religion, could be eliminated in the opening salvo of this war, then the entire language of power, as far as the superpowers' dominance in the world politics, has suddenly been altered. It's very different from what happened in case of, say, Libya in 2011. Muammar Gaddafi was killed almost at the last phase of that war in 2011, though he survived for nearly 9 months and he did all sorts of killings, etc. And in comparison with what happened in Iraq, for example, in 2003, we remember that the opening shots of that war happened around breakfast time in New Delhi, and by lunchtime, the Iraqi state had fallen. In comparison, you see where Iran is today. We are actually on the 8th day of this war. And the United States, despite, you have listed out the strengths of the United States, and obviously the United States will prevail ultimately in any war scenario with any country in the world, given the power that it possesses. But let's look at it from that point of view, that Iran has been able to hold on till the 8th day. And it has also damaged, according to even the US media reports, at least 3 major Gulf military bases, including in Bahrain. So, yes, United States is the superpower, no doubt. But then what is the language that the United States is sending all across? And I think the questions that our viewers and readers are sending us is really reflecting that. So I think, overall for us, the message that we have to first of all look at is that as far as a country of Iran's size, which is like, say, Malaysia, Indonesia, of that range, and I would again come to, say, India, because it's so close to India in that sense geographically. It's the message that everybody should worry about, is that targeting of a leader of a country of Iran's size and civilizational history, if that sort of a message is being conveyed to everybody in this part of the world, then I think it's not a very friendly message. I mean, let's be honest with our friends also, that, you are not supposed to do something like that in India's vicinity or India's extended neighborhood, because ultimately it sends a message that, as our viewers also reflecting, it's alarming in short. So, how I don't really feel that there is any need to review India's foreign policy posture at this point. But then there has to be some frank discussion about if the United States changes its orientation towards its partners. If the United States believes that now it can go all alone and do whatever it wants to do, in the language of the Secretary of War, and as Pete Hegseth said, in United States will win the war and US will do whatever it takes for as long as it takes. For us, the question cannot be as long as it takes, because we are already on the 8th day and the cooking gas prices in India are already shooting. So if this war continues in Pete Hegseth's language, and as long as it takes, then we are going to get very massively hit as far as India's energy security is concerned. And let us not forget, the hundreds and thousands, nearly 1 crore people, 10 million people are now stranded in the Persian Gulf region, in the sense that they are stuck with, there is all sorts of supply chain disruptions. They are expat workers. So I think this war needs to stop at the earliest, and that's in India's interest.
I think that's the kind of message we're getting. Ambassador Dharmendra, I'm going to go on with some of these questions. Suresh Ramachandran says, given that the Iran-US dialogue on nukes was progressing at that time, was this war one for the control of oil supply? Is the US having gained control of Venezuela? Will it be able to dictate the entire global supply chain by destabilizing the Middle East or West Asia? And we've already seen some of that in Qatar. Mitali Anand, the US has been striking Iran for its nuclear program while North Korea is progressing. Why the selective targeting? Another question from Ramesh Prasad again, saying, will the current rise in energy prices hint a relook towards renewables? But there was one more on the US that said, essentially, will this be a long-drawn war? Containment by sanctions, surgical strikes before the war, air supremacy, regime paralysis, all that has not happened. And as Kallol pointed out, the US Secretary of War, as he's known, Peter Hegseth, has been saying that we'll continue until, we have achieved our ends. Mr. Trump himself says nothing short of unconditional surrender from Iran is going to be acceptable to the US. Do you feel, in a sense, that it is inevitable that we head now to a ground offensive from the US? Do you feel that the kind of experiences we have seen, everything from Vietnam to Afghanistan to Iraq 1 to Iraq 2 to Libya, is going to be followed?
Suhasini, I must tell you that, a tip of my hat to all your viewers. Super questions. I mean, they're so well informed and they're so curious. It's really a pleasure listening to all of them and the kind of questions they've asked. Very quickly, I think one of the questions was about ground offensive. Air wars can get you only so far in terms of strategy and intended outcomes. Unless if your intended goal is regime change or whatever fantastic ideas you may have, inserting boots on the ground is required, as they did in Venezuela. They, after all, went in and took out Maduro. It was American troops who went in. But they had inside information. So there is talk. There is a public posturing by Secretary of War and others, but there's also an inner meetings where some of the reports are of concern on the manner in which the Iranians have dragged out for so many days. We get both the reports. So there's a public posturing of we'll take as long as it wants. We will do this. We will do that. But I think internally there is concern on depletion of interceptors. There's concern. The US president summoned all the manufacturers and told them to ramp up production. Ironically, the Americans are reverse engineering the Iranian Shahid drone. It's called Lucas, low-cost, uncrewed attack system. It's actually a reverse-engineered the Iranian Shahid drone, which is caused havoc. So we'll see a very rapid, dynamic underplaying. So yes, there will be deep concerns in the US Congress because this is not an authorized war. President Trump has not taken congressional approval for war under their War Act or War. I forget what the name is. War Act, I think.
Yes.
Second, I think the energy supplies will continue to be impacted. I think that's where there will be a reordering of the global table in terms of what your strategic needs will be, how you're going to now address your strategic reserves, so on and so forth. Another aspect is, I think this is important to keep in mind, the revolution in military affairs, the kind of war doctrines which are now undergoing change. The Americans have overwhelming power, but an asymmetric capability can blind a multi-million dollar THAAD air interception system. The Iranians have been able to attack Israel at will. I mean, you can have the most advanced AD systems, but it can be penetrated by a $20,000 drone. So there's going to be a reordering on multiple fronts going forward. One obviously is economic energy, the other is military, and the third is the dynamics in the region which have now been set loose. There is going to be reordering in the Gulf countries, how they will engage the United States, how they will participate in the U.S. economy. Do keep in mind they've made massive commitments in billions of dollars for Trump's initiative called the Board of Peace. There are questions coming out of the Gulf countries. What have we done? Why are we paying so many billions of dollars and look what we have reaped? So I think these will all be known unknowns as we go forward.
I'll just come in here quickly. You see, when you mentioned the issue of ground offensive, and since we had an off-the-record discussion, which we can now discuss with Mr. Khatibzadeh, one of the things that I asked him that, you have nearly 12 proxies in the region. And I asked him, I sought permission and I said, I'll be frank with you. And let us also discuss your proxies because they are heavily armed. They are financed and supported by you. And we have not yet seen that you have activated them. But in case there is a ground invasion of Iran, then let us be absolutely certain that the entire region will be in a very unstable condition because Iran will then activate all the proxies. And this is something that he obviously didn't mention, but he said something which is important. And he said that we don't want our friends in the region to fight for us. It is our fight, our existential battle, and we will deal with it in our own way. But they are very upset because their spiritual leader has been assassinated. So it's a kind of a warning that if push comes to shove, the entire region, these 12 to 14 proxy groups that are active in all these countries, from Lebanon to Yemen to Saudi Arabia to Syria, Iraq, of course, that's where things will be. And I think the ground invasion, if it at all is initiated, will basically drag the entire Arab Gulf states into Iran wars, in that sense that the ground invasion will then spill into some sort of a ground dynamics for the Arab Gulf states also. And by that expansion of the theater, we will also see India's critical interests getting heavily impacted because we have 1 crore people living there and working there, earning foreign remittances, and plus our energy security. And this sort of a region-wide ground level violence and militancy will be of serious concern to India.
Certainly. And, when you speak about India's
Suhasini, can I
please go ahead.
Can I quickly jump in?
Yes.
Kallol made some interesting points. One, I think we have to keep in mind the changed landscape in the region post October 7th attacks in Israel, the Hamas Israel developments. Progressively after that, Israel has taken out every Iranian proxy in the region. Hezbollah is hugely weakened after the death of Hassan Nasrallah. Syria, Bashar Assad is gone, a very strong pro-Iranian leader. Iraq, the militias are basically divided. the pro-Iranian militias, and some of them are saying we don't want Iran's war in our country. So we have a changed landscape in the region, a very weakened Hamas, a decimated Hezbollah, which has really got nothing left. The Israelis have taken them out in the last 2 years. Bashar Assad is no longer there. The entire air corridor from Israel to Iran goes through these countries, these three countries, and there's nobody to bring down their aircraft. They don't have to go through Jordan or Saudi Arabia. They just have to go through Iraq and Syria. Second, I think we forget how big Iran is. Iran is a huge country, and it's got two very big mountain ranges: the Alborz to the north and the Zagros to the west. Any expectations or of a ground offensive either by the Kurds or the other Arab groups into Iran will, I think, will be, Iran has never been invaded. It's always been able to fight off any invasions. So I think Kurds are also hugely divided. The American strategy of saying we'll do a ground invasion. We will not do it. We will not put our forces, but we'll get the Kurds to do it. I don't think that's going down well with Kurds. But do keep in mind, we have Kurds in Syria, Iraq, Turkey, and Iran. Turkey will be hugely concerned if the Kurds start going into Iran. They will not like it very much. Therefore, the silence of Turkey so far also has to be kept in mind when we talk of the Gulf
Exactly.
countries. Turkey has also, and Turkey is a NATO member. So Turkey is also a NATO member, and keeping Turkey on side by the Iranians will be in their best interest, because something were to happen inadvertently, then NATO will invoke Article 5. Then we have a whole different ballgame, and Iranians would want to go down that route. So I
Sure.
think these are very fast-moving developments we have to keep in mind, the multiple complexities which are at play.
Right. In fact, Ambassador, I have to tell you that some of our viewers are writing into some of the things that are being said. Some are asking why we aren't talking about the Iranian children and the question of war crimes. And I think even the US is right now investigating what happened with that particular school, as well as the hospital. Someone else pointing out that actually Hezbollah, despite the fact that Hassan Nasrallah was killed, despite those pager bombs that supposedly targeted only Hezbollah last year, and despite recurrent Israeli incursions on the ground, as you said, on that side of the Litani River, Hezbollah has been posing a sort of threat to Iran, to the point where we've seen more such attacks by Iran on Lebanon. In the last few days. I want to shift now the focus. We're talking about how India has to recognize the Gulf region has changed, Israel's neighborhood has changed. And of course, this means a lot for India, because India had been, prior to October 7, 2023, really planning this big project of the IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, which really for the moment seems completely unmovable. But I want to move our attention to what this means for India in its neighborhood. Not many are talking about how this particular war, as it has played out, is going to weigh in on India's ties with its neighbors. When it comes to Afghanistan, with the going away of the Chabahar port option to circumvent Pakistan, that's going to have some kind of an impact. For Pakistan, bordering Iran, the fact that Pakistan has more or less remained, non-committal in this particular war, will it work against Pakistan or for Pakistan? On the other side, India is part of so many of these forums. We saw Prime Minister Modi go from what was called Sagar, security and growth for all in the region, to something called Mahasagar, and then speak about India's position in the Indian Ocean Rim Association, IORA, in the Indian Ocean Conference, in the Information Fusion conference as well. I think it's called IFC Center, Information Fusion Center of the Indian Ocean region, the Colombo Security Conclave that we hold with Mauritius, Seychelles, Maldives, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh. All of these are contingent on one idea, which is that India is in a sort of as a net security provider in this Indian Ocean region. It's not possible for India just to say our responsibilities end at our territorial waters, simply because India itself has been projecting the idea of being a net security provider. Finally, there is the Quad initiative for the Indo-Pacific. The idea was always that the Quad would in some way pose a counter to countries like China that were going to either bring violence or block sea lanes in the Indo-Pacific. Instead, what we're seeing is the US is bombing ships in the Indian Ocean. I'm making that long sort of assessment so that I can ask you, Ambassador Dharmendra, do you think India's region is going to be changed forever by what we have seen in this Gulf War 3.0?
I think a lot of regions are going to change. Going forward, the international order, there will be a lot of rethinking in terms of engagements, in terms of partnerships, in terms of how countries deal with very, very fragile supply chains, energy security. I think all these will there will be a reordering, including in the military domain. I mean, countries will now see is it worth it to invest in multi-million-dollar systems which can be brought down by a 10,000 drone. So we'll see a lot of rearranging. Second, I think India has demonstrated repeatedly that it can be a dependable first responder for humanitarian humanitarian disasters. We've supplied fresh water to Maldives, assisted Sri Lanka. I think those fundamentals will not change. India will continue to remain an active, proactive player in the Indian Ocean region. I think on the IMEC, I2U2, Chabahar, we'll have to wait and see how these play out. IMEC for the foreseeable future, as you rightly pointed out, I don't see it going anywhere. Abraham Accords, again, I think they are now more or less done and dusted. It's going to take a lot to revive those arrangements with Israel by the Arab countries. Quad, this administration has been very, very, relaxed about the Quad. They've not talked much about it. So I think India will have to now, has been doing, I don't think now, we have always been doing, be much more agile, recognize these developments and prepare ourselves. I think that is what we'll be doing going forward. On Chabahar, I think it's not yet over. We're still, a month and a half away. Maybe there will be some backroom negotiations to give it another extension. I think that's very important for our, role in Iran. For the INSTC and also for food security of Afghanistan. A lot of the shipments go through Chabahar. But overall, I think Indian Ocean region, it will continue to be a mix of HADR, first responder. They are important for our recognition of our maritime strategy. I think those will remain in play. And overall, I think the dominance of various navies in the region, including the Chinese PLA Navy, the US forces, negotiations going on about continued presence in Diego Garcia. I think the maritime issues will be playing a big role in the coming years.
Okay. We're also getting news just in which I'm actually just trying to verify about an explosion somewhere near the Dubai airport, and for the last few hours we've been tracking flight paths around the UAE, which have been, in a holding position. But I wanted you to come in on this, Kallol, on the idea of how is India's neighborhood going to change?
Well, we had a discussion with Khatibzadeh about that as well. And what he mentioned was very interesting. He said that you are talking about the Kurdish groups, Kurds, getting activated by the United States. And some of these, insurgents have already been arrested by Iran. But he mentioned an interesting point. He said, we are also watching the Baloch militants in Pakistan, because Baloch militants will also be utilized against Iran. So as far as South Asia security situation, that's one point that I wanted to mention first. Second, let's look at from the energy security point of view, say Nepal. Nepal's entire energy supply goes through India or from Indian sources. If India comes under pressure, if India's energy security scenario comes under pressure, you can imagine that India will be forced to tell Nepal that, look, wait for some time, as we are under pressure ourselves and we have to deal with the situation at home. So we remember very well what happened in 2015 with Nepal, when Nepal was actually without energy for a significant number of days because of the land blockage. So I'm just reminding our viewers about how things were at that time, and things can again be repeated because of compulsions that India may face. Third, if we look at what's happening on the Bangladesh front, Bangladesh Dhaka used to be the capital where Indian and High Commission used to be the most powerful actor. But today it is the United States Embassy which is the most powerful actor in Bangladesh. So again, as far as the region is concerned, the fingerprints of the United States is more prominently visible today than they were before. So India's regional profile also is something that's in a way diminished because of direct interaction that the superpower is having with India's neighbors. Again, if we come to Sri Lanka, what has taken place in Sri Lanka just 72 hours earlier is a very clear message as far as the Indian Ocean region is concerned. And Prime Minister Modi, in his speech, I think yesterday, while meeting his foreign guests, he talked about how India being the net security provider. Again, it is more an reiteration of a point which is not being respected by the superpower itself. So how are we going to look at the region in that sort of a context where the security aspect, as we are talking about the Baloch militants, they are being utilized for some reason in the Iranian theater by the external players. And we already saw what happened in that Shia mosque in Pakistan. There was a blast a few weeks ago in Pakistan, and there was a lot of discussion at that time that is that a message to Pakistan by some forces that if Pakistan does not cooperate, then things could actually escalate inside Pakistan as far as the Shia minority is concerned. And Pakistan has a very long history of riots because of Shia factor, especially in Karachi as well as in Peshawar. So from the Baloch to Peshawar to Karachi to what can happen in South Asia if energy security is disrupted, Bangladesh has already given an order to its people to reduce use of private vehicles in view of disruption in energy supplies from the Gulf. So overall, there will be a set of challenges, and as the ambassador is pointing out, this is a very rapidly evolving situation that we are witnessing. Already 3 persons from the region have died, in the sense that in bombing, there is one Nepali, one Bangladeshi, and one Pakistani person has already 3 of them have died. That apart, Indian sailors have died. So this is again the other angle. The human tragedy is the other thing that we have to look at. There are journalist colleagues of ours who are trapped in Dubai and they are not able to leave. But then let us look at it from this point of view that, when you have bread and butter issues related to so many families of India, how these families are also being affected because of this conflict. So from security to bread and butter to energy security, I think South Asia will have a lot on its hands in the coming days.
Certainly. Ambassador Dharmendra, we're going into a little bit of extra time only because we've got so many more viewer questions coming in. Some of them are questions that I would like to pose to you, although you may not particularly like them. The idea that India has, in a sense, its image has taken a hit, and that India's Indian foreign policy has somehow let down what India had sort of projected itself to be. So the idea that Lakshmi Srinivas asking, are we no longer independent or non-aligned? It's scary that the US is so aggressive, almost as if they'll do anything for their own benefit, and all countries in the world, including India, need to think about these developments. There are others saying that it just means that the world does not revolve around India, and this is coming home to us. Praveen D says, he quotes the thinker Pratap Bhanu Mehta, says he recently wrote that realism in foreign policy promises toughness, but in practice is producing softness towards power and hardness towards the powerless. Has India capitulated under US pressure and completely moved closer to the US Israel axis, given up strategic autonomy, especially given the incident in the Indian Ocean? Mohammad Nihal saying the loser of this war is not the participants, but India. It will affect India by its net exports, a questioning of its position as a leader of the global south, Gulf remittances leaving the Chabahar port, which you just addressed as well. So, this is the nature of the kind of questions we are getting. I also wanted to tack on one more question, which is, this is a year India was to have, if it still is, chair the BRICS summit and hold the summit in Delhi. BRICS would mean the extended BRICS, the fact that Iran and the UAE are both now members of it. And as chairperson, some would have looked to India to start now to get involved, formulate some kind of a rapprochement or an ability to put out a BRICS understanding of the situation. Yet none of that has happened. Do you think India will even be able to claim that chairmanship of the summit and hold that summit this year? If you'd like to take address any of the questions I've just pointed out.
I think overall comment would be more, in keeping with the sense of the questions I'm getting. I think foreign policy, domestic policy, these are all based on realistic assessments on how we engage our partners and how we safeguard our interests. So they will evolve. It's not new. History of foreign policy going back decades will show that we have been very nimble, whether in 1971 during the Bangladesh crisis, or during the first Iraq War, second Iraq War, the U.S. invasion in Afghanistan. We have to be mindful that these developments realistic assessment, engagement, and response. We need not comment on every development. We may have our own internal assessments, but we need not go public and say that, this is what we feel, this is how it should be done. I don't think that is in our culture. The political culture, political framing of our policies have been much more nuanced, much more careful, and more balancing. Yeah, we will be criticized. I think internally, that's already started. I think externally, every country is watching how this is going to play out. Nobody has an idea what the outcomes are, what the closure will be, what will satisfy the Americans that now that their objectives have been met, whatever may be those objectives. There's no clarity on that. I think overall we'll have to look at it that way. But in terms of our own engagement in the BRICS, I think, Suhasini, you have made a very valid point. Iran is a member of BRICS. I think we could have been a little more front-footed in our comments, particularly even taking advantage of Deputy Khatibzadeh's presence in Delhi. We could have been a little, vocal about our responses and our close ties with Iran. Do keep in mind they were our neighbors till 1947. So we have a long history and engagement and cultural convergences.
Which is true. Final thoughts to both of you, and some of the questions we've been getting are really what happens now? What is the end game scenario? We've heard from America, from the US president saying, we'll keep going. Mr. Hegseth has said we are now entering phase 2 of this war. So that's going to be another 12 to 14 days. So already America has gone from looking at hours to days to weeks of a possible conflict. Kallol, is there a sense of what we should be taking our cues from in terms of what is the end game? Obviously, a lot of people who are simply asking about their business or about travel, the scenario. Others are asking about whether this will spread, and still others want to know whether what we are seeing as a regional war, Gulf War 3.0, is actually going to become a world war.
Well, Suhasini, I think I'll talk about the overall approach here. That if this war continues, then one of the major economies that is going to be very negatively affected is India. The first one to be negatively affected will be India because it is very close to India. Now, number one, of course, we have discussed the energy aspect. Second, of course, is if the violence spreads from the formal and conventional to non-conventional mode. The ambassador talked about proxy groups like Lebanon, Hezbollah, and in Syria, etc. But there are also proxies in Bahrain, in Eastern Saudi Arabia, etc. Which are there and they are active. They have not been, destroyed by Israel because they are in friendly Gulf Arab territories. Because these are also groups that will respond in their own very disparate manner. So we don't know how these groups are going to respond in an evolved security scenario. Number one. Second, of course, is if this war continues like this, then the entire South Asian region slowly, gradually, because of multiple factors, including the presence of Shias in all the countries in the region, will be emotionally affected. We are already seeing the protests that are taking place in Kashmir. There are protests in different parts of India. People are pouring into the Iranian embassy in Delhi, who are really in a mourning situation because of the killing of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And I think these are factors that cannot be just brushed aside, and we cannot go ahead with our relation with the United States as if nothing is affecting India. Ambassador talked about the culture of India's foreign policy formulation. I think right now what the Indian government and Indian policymakers need to do is that expand that table of discussion so that more people could join in, so that there could be little more transparency. As our viewers also pointing out, they're also asking questions that are quite legitimate to raise at this point. After all, the purpose of foreign policy for a state, in very very theoretical terms, is that a state follows foreign policy to enhance its power profile. If a state follows a policy that is not enhancing its power profile, then citizens will naturally raise these questions that, what kind of policy is my state following that is actually not enhancing my power, but is in fact contributing to my growing insecurity, from the point of view of less foreign remittances to less energy security and disrupted supply chains. These are questions that people will ask in these sort of moments. And this is why I feel that since Parliament obviously can't be briefed, but then the Parliamentary Committee on External Affairs need to be briefed almost on daily basis, because the situation is changing so fast. And we have not really seen the Parliamentary Standing Committee on External Affairs meet in the last few days, at least in the last 1 week. But I think the Foreign Office should immediately take the Parliament into confidence and brief the members of Parliament who are involved in foreign policy making, that what exactly is India planning to do. Because people of India also have a right, and the Parliament, obviously not all of it, but then the committees concerned may be consulted at this point. And our viewers are asking, has India become weak? Legitimate question to ask, because the government of the day is supposed to make India stronger, because we all want our country, our state to become stronger in a very uncertain world. And if we are not perceiving that, then these questions are quite expected.
Certainly, Ambassador Dharmendra, I'll give you a chance to respond to what Kallol just said. And I should point out that the last time the External Affairs Committee in Parliament met, actually, the Foreign Secretary was asked very strongly about the timing of Prime Minister Modi's visit to Israel. Most of them at that time had said, and this was just 2 days before Prime Minister Modi traveled to Israel, so on the 23rd of February, asking, is this the right time to go to Israel? Is this the right time to show that India stands with Israel? What Prime Minister Modi said in the Knesset that followed. So a lot of the criticism has been, particularly of that visit, was over the timing, not over actually going to Israel, which is a strategic partner. So I'll let you take that part of what Kallol said, and then your final thoughts on where you think this war is going.
Uh, Kallol, I think some interesting points were made, and I think in an open society, debate is necessary. We should be able to engage and discuss openly how exactly policies are being made, whether it's in healthcare or foreign policy or defense or what have you. I think debate, and we have engaged all parties. That's I think that should be kept going. I do agree a kind of statement on how we perceive developments in the region would be better served for our foreign policy makers. I agree with that. I think, but traditionally we've not done that. I mean, we have to keep that in mind. Historically, we've not done it. I'm sure there will be a briefing for the standing committee sometime. Foreign Secretary may go. I don't know what's happening in there. But we have engaged all parties. We have a tradition of engaging all parties and briefing them on what our interests are and what we are doing to safeguard those interests. I think we have to keep in mind that in the US, we are witnessing a particularly mercurial administration whose decision making is very unpredictable, whose kind of, the kind of pressure tactics they've adopted, whether with India or European Union or the Koreans, a tariff war on any country which have been ruled illegal by their own Supreme Court. We are looking at a very, very unpredictable US administration for which really there is no prepared response we can have. We just have to also make up as we go and respond as best as we can to safeguard our interests. Do keep in mind, I pointed out earlier, we did continue to resist pressure and persisted with our imports of Russian crude for quite some time. I think we've kept that pressure up and we said, okay, we'll stay down the tariffs. But we kept the engagement process going. I think that is a much more realistic, and it was not always in the public domain how these engagements were playing out. I think I will leave that there. On the whole subject of discussion, what we are talking about, it is still unclear today, 1 week into these developments, what exactly are the off ramps for the three main countries concerned, and then the neighbors in the Gulf. But the economic effects of these developments will continue to play out for a long time. Kallol, you mentioned India having a challenging time in terms of our energy. Keep in mind, there are two other factors. One is China also will be stressed. They have substantial reserves and they have a pipeline with Russia for
Russia,
supply
yeah.
of natural gas. I think they've got that advantage. How will the Europeans now, given the stresses coming out of the Gulf countries, how will the Europeans now change their policy and will they go back to Russia? I think it's inevitable at some time soon. Lastly, we are not completely, I think we should let me rephrase that. I think we should better factor in US energy play. They are a big natural gas producer. They are also a big fracking and, big crude producer. How will they now jump in and plug some of these supply chain gaps? And will we start, we buy crude from them, will we also start buying gas? We may have to at some stage. So net, the US may be looking beyond just belligerence, maybe trying to dominate some of the supply chain dimensions of energy, control choke points. After all, they keep talking about Greenland because they want to control the northern Arctic route. So we're looking at a reordering of the global table, I would say. I think we'll have to keep that macro picture in mind. And any policy we make will have to adapt, respond, and prepare for that kind of reality. I think that's we'll have to keep that bigger macro picture in mind when we look at the current developments and not just get caught in the current moment, but look at what the horizon
Correct.
challenges we'll need to gear up to.
Absolutely. And I think many of our viewers have been pointing this out with their questions, that it's about those larger consequences, not just for India, but for the region and the world. Thank you, Ambassador Gaddam Dharmendra, Kallol Bhattacherjee. This was a very interesting webinar for me. I learned a lot, and I learned a lot from the kind of questions our viewers and readers have been sending in. So if you've joined us over the past hour or so, do write in, and thanks so much.
Thank you.